Hi, and welcome to Genre Chat. I'm Sherry Lindisbano. We're in for a treat today. We have the Blue Ridge Christian Mountain Writers Conference blog guy with us. Most of you know him. His name is Vincent Davis, but Vincent Davis isn't just a blog guy. There's so much more to him, and he's going to teach us about historical fiction. Vincent, tell us more about yourself and what kind of historical fiction you write.
Okay, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to be here. I write primarily ancient Roman historical fiction. It's been a passion of mine for about a decade now. I've been researching and just digging into the culture, getting to know it. I think that's the first responsibility of anyone writing historical fiction.
Mm.
I hope to touch on a couple other areas. I'm fascinated by World War II, by the early 20s. But yeah, historical fiction. So I published my first book last July, and it's been great. There's a lot more fans of historical fiction out there than you might expect. And
I love historical fiction. I like reading and learning things at the same time. So what's the name of your book?
the name of the book is The Man with Two Names.
It's The Man with Two Names, not the book with two names.
The Man with
Yeah,
Two Names.
that sounds big. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main character is a man by the name of Quintus Sertorius. Say that 10
Ooh,
times fast.
that
Not
sounds Roman.
yes, his name's Quintus Sertorius, and he was he's a very important piece of the puzzle when you're researching ancient Rome and how the Republic turned into an empire. He was alive and contributing in ancient Rome just a couple years, maybe 20, 30 years before Julius Caesar was born. So, but he's kind of been lost to history because he rebelled against Rome. He was involved in a civil war, the first Roman civil war, and he ended up kind of taking the losing side. And eventually, he fled to Spain and led a revolt against Rome for almost a decade. And he was never wanting to fight against Rome itself, but he was fighting against the corrupt oligarchy that he believed was in control of the Senate. So I think he's been a very neglected figure in Roman history, and I think he's a fascinating character. So he's kind of been my hero for several years now. So it's been exciting to write from his point of view. It's a first-person narrative, and just be able to dig in and kind of live there for a couple of years.
So you chose a real life person and you're writing a story around him.
Yes. So almost everything that I write about has been very is well researched. The things that aren't that I don't attribute to history, they're things that could have happened. Just kind of inferring, reading between the lines. So, and especially the first text. This is going to be a long series. I don't know how many parts. It just kind of depends on how it all comes together. But this one just chronicles the first 20 to 25 years of his life. So it's how he started in Roman politics, how he started in the military, so there's a little bit less information about that point in his life, but I tried to make it all as historically accurate as possible.
That's what I love about historical fiction, especially if you take a character and their name and you know a little bit about them and you expound on that within the culture. And
right.
So tell us a little bit. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself pretty soon, but I want you to, we kind of figured out you're fascinated with this genre. So, and you're doing a lot of research. Somebody who wants to get into this genre, can you kind of explain to them how much research goes into this?
Yeah. No, so the research aspect, I think specifically with a genre or with a topic like ancient Rome, but really any historical fiction, the people that are going to be the most interesting or most interested to read it, they know what they're talking about. They know what to look for. So you really have to be on top of it. I think if you just have a piece of technology or equipment or or even just words, that shouldn't have been used at that time. There's a lot of cliche sayings and things like that that we kind of take for granted. You have to be very comfortable with the time period you're working in and have done a lot of research about that, so that you can fully be there. You close your eyes and you can be in ancient Rome for a day. The research aspect it's an ongoing process. It never ends. I began researching ancient Rome pretty heavily in 2010. So it's been nearly a decade of really just digging in, reading the primary sources, reading, the ancient Roman writers themselves, reading all the modern commentary on it. But it never ends, so I do know more about ancient Rome and about the time period now than when I wrote the first book. And I hope to know even more than I do now when I'm writing the third book. So, so it's an ongoing process, but research is extremely important. And that's something I think writers, they're so excited to tell the story, they want to jump into it, but I think that's a big mistake.
That they don't do the complete research.
That they don't do more research.
So what would you recommend? Would you recommend like going to maybe a university and talking to a professor who specifically teaches that? What else would you recommend for people to do?
Yeah, I think that would be excellent if you're in an area where you have that option. The first thing I do is, first of all, I buy a ton of books. I buy way too many books, frankly. But
so you have a Roman library.
Yes, I really do. I really do have a little library. The first thing is just being, having sources that you can just consult. Very few of them do I read cover to cover. It has to be a pretty special one for me to do that. But other than that, I just reference them constantly. So I've got a book called The Constitution of the Roman Republic. And when I need to learn something about on what day were the consuls elected, what day did they take office, I can consult that. Or, they were a republic, but they weren't the same kind of republic that we have today. So being able to understand, so having that kind of stuff, having biographies on the main characters of the book. But one thing that I do, and it might not be necessary for everybody, but academia.com, I believe is what it is. And they just have tons of papers published by experts in whatever field. And I'll just go in there and kind of type out some of the topics I'm dealing with, maybe some of the main characters or secondary characters. And they have some real gems.
Is that academia.com?
Yes.
So is that site sounds like a really great resource for people who are doing historical fiction. Yes. Now, is who makes sure that site is accurate?
Well,
is that like peer reviewed? Is it peer reviewed? Peer reviewed means other people look at it.
Certain, but at least all the people that I've read on there, their credentials are on there. So I couldn't just put something out there. It has to, it's through universities. It's through scholarly texts. And collections like that. So most of the people that I find on there, they've actually written books on ancient Rome, and now they just write, a couple, shorter, just kind of explaining one particular topic, and just, it's submitted through there, I guess, by their university.
That's thank you for mentioning that, because that seems like a great resource for any time period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what is the greatest lesson you've learned writing historical fiction?
Oh, wow. Greatest writing, or the greatest lesson. Well, it's interesting because the Romans were such a romantic people in their own way. So there's all kinds of little things that I'm reading, and I'm just like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I want to apply this to my life. I think that's what ultimately inspired me so much to write about history in general, and to learn about it as well. It wasn't just research, going through history classes in school. I always found it a little lackluster. It's about dates and facts and figures, and being able to identify locations or whatever. And and that wasn't what it was about for me. It was about the lessons learned. So, I mean, there's just a lot of examples.
Give
You
us a
know,
few. Give us a few. If you can,
okay,
you think of a few?
yeah,
Give us. I'd love to hear them. I think we all would love
okay,
to hear them. I'm with you on the history. I like to learn from what the people were learning at that time. The dates
yeah.
and stuff matter, but I'm a people person. I'd rather learn about the people and what they did day to day. So, what lessons have you learned?
Yeah, I think that you struck on something there. That's like my whole goal with writing is I think when we even looking back just past our grandparents' generation or our great grandparents, anything past that we tend to not see humans. We
Mm,
see what they accomplished. We see the great, the 40,000 foot view, but we don't see people. So that's like when I'm writing about ancient Rome, it's very important that I'm getting into the day to day. And human interaction doesn't change much. Cultures change, values can change some, but how people respond to each other, loving one another, that those things don't change. So, but one of the lessons that come to mind is Sertorius. His men were all clamoring for battle.
mm-hmm.
They wanted to meet the Romans when he was a rebel. They wanted to meet the Romans in just a pitched combat, army against army, see who's stronger. And he didn't want to do that. He didn't believe that they were ready for that. So he kind of wanted to be, he was an early proponent of guerrilla warfare, little skirmishes
Yes.
here and there. And so he pulled two horses and brought them into the front of his army. And one of them was just sickly and small. It was just very, probably at its last leg of life. And then it brought another one out that was the strongest horse in the legion. It was tough,
Mm,
full, full hair, coat of hair. And then he brought out two people to match them: the weakest soldier in the army, a puny
mm,
little guy, and a big, strong, burly guy.
mm.
He tasked them with pull out the hair from their tails, pull their entire, tail, the hair off the tail. And so he put the strong man on the weak horse, and he's sitting there tugging and pulling and trying to rip the hair off of the tail. But he put the weak man on the strong horse, and he plucks one by one.
Mm.
And the weak man, the strong horse, he was able to take that full, thick mane, or
Oh,
he was able to take that whole thing, while the strong man could never get the weak horses.
without getting kicked.
Right. Yeah. So the lesson is that you can be more victorious by small, and by being patient and by, one at
Wow.
a time, rather than trying to take the whole thing at once, which can be, really difficult. So that's one lesson that stuck out to me, but there's so many.
Now, let me ask you, do you study in that time period, the Roman time period, there were things going on elsewhere in the world. Do you study that as well to see what was going on around them?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah, absolutely. So I would say that I definitely want to have a really strong view of the entire Mediterranean.
mm,
So I know, because a lot of these Roman soldiers, this is right about the time, because I'm writing right about 100 BC, right around the time of
right.
the birth of Julius Caesar. So this is right when the Romans were really starting to expand.
Yeah.
Outside of Little Italy, they had land in Africa. They had some claims to land in Spain and in Gaul. They were kind of starting to really stretch out. They had already conquered Greece. So having a good grasp of what culture was like at that time in those various places is all very important. I haven't really gone outside of the Mediterranean to, like, the Far East and things like that, just because there hasn't, because the Romans and them hadn't really connected at that point.
Right.
Um, at least on any big scale, they might have had some communication, but very little. Um, so the majority of my focus has just been on understanding those cultures around the Mediterranean, especially where, like, the main character Quintus Sertorius, he spends over half of the novel not in Rome but in Gaul, fighting against
Mm,
Germans. And so it's that has been a huge focus, is not just learning about what was the city like and what did city dwellers do, but how did the Roman army interact with the locals, with the Germans.
Wow. And there's just so much. If you can think of writing, when you write in a certain time period, can you list 3 or 4 things that would be a telltale sign that people did not do their homework? Like one of them maybe being, like you had mentioned before, verbiage, language.
Yeah. Okay. So this is how careful you have to be. I got a 1-star review from someone that said they really enjoyed my book, but there was one word that slipped past me, my readers, all of my editors. I said I was too wired to sleep. So
Oh.
yeah, for us, that's something you say. I was too wired to sleep. I was too energetic. I was too anxious to sleep. And that one thing did not fit. And I got a 1-star review for it. So you have to be very careful. I think that cliches and just kind of things that we say and take for granted, I think those are very easily slip into a text. I think the big things, I don't think that anyone's going to accidentally place a car in ancient Rome or I don't think those big things. I don't think anybody's going to have a computer or anything like that.
Or a cell phone.
Or a cell phone. Yeah, somebody's walking around with a smartwatch. I think that the kind of tiny things. So I think it's very important to go through it thoroughly after it's written and make sure your editors are on board with that. But also to do your research on the front end and have such a firm understanding of the culture and the times that you're writing in, that there's not anything out of place. For instance, like one thing that we can take for granted is, for strong Roman soldier types, where do they go when they have a night off? Well, in today's modern world, soldiers might go to a bar.
Mm-hmm.
The Romans have bars. So if in the way that we see bars,
Mm-hmm.
would they have had that? So you have to research that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, because a lot of the readers, they're not going to carry their weight. It's going to go right over their head. But a lot of the ones that are really interested in that time period, I'd say probably 25% of the people that have reviewed my book, at least, they're dedicated ancient Rome readers. They read everything that comes out about Roman politics or Roman legions. And so they know their stuff. They know what they're looking for. So if you have anything out of place, they're going to get you.
Do you recommend then getting like a few beta readers who are, or even someone who's a professor in that time period to read the book? Because I know me personally, when I read my own writing, I miss things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think that that's a great idea. One way that I would do that is go to the book that is most comparable to yours on Amazon. And, they're writing about the same topic. Go to the reviews, look at some of the top reviewers. A lot of them, not most, so you can't just go at anybody, but a lot of the top reviewers, they're perennial reviewers, and they make their emails available. And so for a free copy, they'll read and review your book. So I think you could probably even do that. That's great on the back end after the book is published when you need more reviews. But you can also do that on the front end. Say, hey, I can tell that this genre. I loved the book that you also loved. I think mine is comparable to it. Would you be interested in reading it, giving me a little feedback and telling me if I missed anything like that? So, it could be hit or miss, but I'd say some of them would be really interested in helping out young authors. So I think that would be great. And if you know a professor in that field that would be interested, or I think that would be excellent.
I think it's a great idea to go to Amazon, and like you just said, I think that's a phenomenal idea, because you're telling that you're recognizing that person, that reader, as kind of like an expert, and they're going to love that. Yeah. And then if they like your book, they're going to tell everybody else to read your book. So it's kind of like a win-win.
Right, exactly. Those reviewers, they tend to be influencers in their own reviewer community. You know, one of the best connections I've made was just a lady reviewed one of my books and gave it a great review. It wasn't even a 5-star. She gave me a 4-star, but it was so thorough and so well thought out, and so you know, just a really in-depth review. And so I kind of did what you know, some people frown on it, but I just messaged and said, hey, I don't typically message my reviewers. I did want to say just that was such a great review. Thank you. And I would love to send you stuff in the future, and maybe you can review it. So since then, I've already sent her other material. She's given me feedback, and she's in huge groups of hundreds, maybe thousands of other readers of historical fiction, and particularly of ancient Rome. And they all get on there and they talk about books they like. So that's the kind of person you want to be in front of. So, and those are the kind of people that can help identify weaknesses in your material.
That's great advice. I mean, I think I might try that when my book comes out. That's really critical, because you're not using them. It's a win-win situation for both of you. So I want to ask you, do you have other books in the ancient Rome historical fiction genre? That's what your work in progress is. Are you writing anything that's not historical fiction?
Well, see, it kind of depends on how you want to classify it. So I finished the first ancient Rome book, and that's been published. That's been out for almost a year now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been great. So in October, I decided to kind of step out. I followed my muse, so to speak, and I had this story idea about Sicilian immigrants in the 20s and 30s, and I couldn't let it go. And I wanted to give the first book, the Man with Two Names, a little bit more time to take off before I had the second one out there, and it since has. So now I'm like scrambling because I really want to get the next book out there. But so I wrote 2 books back to back. I wrote 2 books from October to December. I was writing 2,000 words a day at least. It was great. It just was. I was in that flow state. It was perfect. But yeah, so that one's in the 1920s. So there's actually the research aspect was very nearly the same.
Wow.
I would probably more likely call it a crime thriller, but it's a historical crime thriller if you want to be technical, because there's still those elements of researching the 20s culture.
It's so different. It's so different.
It is, yeah, and especially with, I think you have to be even more careful the closer you get to modern times, because it's easier to make mistakes. You know, it's easier to take something for granted that, like, okay, for instance, when I was writing those, air conditioning or refrigerators, or radios. So at one point in my book, they did have radios. Nearly everybody had a radio. But in 1908, when the book was starting, they didn't. So you got to be very careful. Got to do all your research. And the research was different, but I would still kind of classify it as historical fiction. But I'd say when it's
yes, I would too. I would too. That they sound very interesting. So now, a little bit off the subject, are you going to dress as one of those guys for Blue Ridge?
For Blue Ridge, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I don't know if I could take on a full Roman garb.
Well, the 20s would probably be a little safer.
Would probably be a little bit better. Probably shouldn't bring any swords to Blue Ridge.
No, you couldn't get them on the plane.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I might do that. I'll have to bring a fedora and a suit because all these guys are. It's about the early Italian mafia.
The thin ties, yes. Oh, that would be great.
Yes.
So, tell us. We only have like a few minutes. It's gone by so fast. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know you're a soldier, right? You're in the military.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about your personal background and how someone could get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So yeah, I am a soldier. That's been
Thank
an
you
important.
for your service.
Thank you. Thank you for yours.
Thank you.
And it's I think that people say to write what you know, and there's a caveat to that. I don't think you should write exactly what you know, because nobody's that interested in your daily life. If I was just going to write about the military, no one wants to read a book about the life, a day in the life of the average American reservist. No
Tell
one,
me about, I know it can be boring, but
yes,
if you
yeah,
go somewhere and do something, then it's not.
right. It can be, but I mean, even on certain deployments, day after day, it's a lot of monotony, So,
Yep.
but you write about what you know. When I think of that, I write about the emotions, So, um, so a day in the life might not be that interesting, but I do know what it's like to be away from home and be
Mm-hmm.
scared, feel lonely.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to be the new guy in a unit, um,
Mm-hmm.
and so all those things kind of they've all made their way into The Man with Two Names, and I'm sure they will in subsequent editions as well. So it's not necessarily just my story. It's never going to be my story, but it's things that I understand and I've been there, and I think we all have experiences that like that we can
Mm-hmm.
draw on for the story. But yeah, so yeah, I graduated college. I graduated late because when I joined the Army, but I graduated in 2017. I think it was late 2017, so not too long ago, a little over a year. And yeah, so this is what I do. This is what I love. So I have a whole lot of hobbies. I've got a dog. He's my best friend. He's sitting right over there.
Mm-hmm.
We go out and we have fun sometimes, but for the most part, if I'm not writing, I'm helping my clients market their books. That's kind of been a big focus of mine. I graduated with a business degree, so the
Oh,
marketing
can you
aspect.
talk about that a little bit? We have like 2 minutes, but tell our viewers and our listeners about your business, because I didn't know that you did that, and I think that if somebody might be in need of you, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I primarily focus on Amazon. 70% of ebooks are sold on Amazon. Over 40% of books, of paperback and hardback, and that number is even skewed a little bit because of textbooks. There's actually probably more. Amazon has been my focus for The Man with Two Names, and it's been a bestseller in Australia and Canada. It's all about visibility. There's nothing that unique or scary when you just put a book out there and expect it all to
Yeah.
just take off.
People need to know that it's there. They need to,
Right.
like you said, visibility. They need to know it's available. You could have the best written book in the world, but if no one knows it exists, how will anybody buy it?
Right, exactly. So that's kind of the thing for me is there's kind of marketing is kind of seen as it's a scary word for authors. Nobody wants to do
Oh yeah, especially platform. Yeah. So
yeah, they want to be
can
artists.
you help people with that? Do you help people on Amazon?
Absolutely. So the things I do is it's optimizing the categories and the keywords to get the book in front of the most people. That's why it's not scary. You're just trying to get your book in front of the right people.
And you're going to be teaching this at Blue Ridge, correct?
Yes, I've got 3 classes that I'm teaching at Blue Ridge that are going to be going over a lot of these fundamentals of just visibility marketing, getting your book in front of the people who want to read it, and distinguishing yourself from the crowd a little bit.
So how can people get a hold of you, Vincent?
The best way to get a hold of me is my email address. It's simply vincent@13thpress.com. All spelled out.
Is 13th Press your business?
13th Press is my own imprint. So I created that to publish my own books, and maybe one day, if I had the capital and the time and the desire, I'd love to work with it. I love working with other authors in the capacity of a marketer. I don't have the capacity to do full scale stuff, and I believe in
Not yet.
Not yet, maybe in the future. But yeah, so 13th Press is my own imprint, but yeah, no. So I love working with other authors and helping them get their books out there, because I found that a lot of authors have great material, but it's not getting in front of the right people.
So it's Vincent@13thpress.com. So is 13th written out, or is it 13th?
No, it's all written out.
Okay.
Yep, all written out. And that's and there's another thing. 13th comes from Julius Caesar's 13th Legion. Yeah,
13
he
Vincent,
plays a
there
big
you
role.
go.
Yeah,
Isn't that
it plays a
great?
big role in my life. Yeah, it's
I think I want to go get your book. I love reading. Now that I know that you've done that much research. I just want to thank you, Vincent, so much. And Vincent, yes, he is the one that puts together Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers blog. Go see him. Go, if you go to the conference, go say hi to him. Quiz him about ancient Rome. Make sure he
yeah.
knows what he's talking. No, I'm going to ask him some questions. And
Okay.
if you go, let's see what he dresses as. But thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much. And join us next time for Genre Chat.